Welcome, everyone, to our first ever episode of Stage Right. I'm your host, Sierra Haynes. My goal is to bring you along on a journey inside the minds and lives of some of Canada's most exciting playwrights. All right, so how this show is going to work is twofold. First, I've picked 5 playwrights that I'm curious to speak with, and then those playwrights pick another playwright that inspires them. Whatever you're doing, we've got a story for you. This is Stage Right. For our first episode, I thought I'd stick close to home here on the Saskatchewan Prairies. I've invited Artistic Director of Gordon Tootoosis Nikaniwin Theatre in Saskatoon and playwright in her own right, Jennifer Dawn Bishop, to sit down with me. Jennifer is a Metis artist of the Treaty 6 territory. Her journey with the Saskatchewan Native Theatre Company, now Gordon Tootoosis Theatre, started when it first opened its doors in 1999 with the Circle of Voices program. Continuing her passion in the arts, Jennifer's most recent work includes directing for stage, screen, and audiobook with Penguin Random House Canada. Her play Shadow Among the Prairies had its world premiere presented at the new Shakespeare on the Saskatchewan site in 2021. Together, we discuss identity, belonging, cultural discovery, and what it means to create an artistic and personal legacy. Before we jump into our conversation, I'd like to give you a little bit of context for the shows that we're discussing in today's conversation. There are 3 of them. Iskateo, the story of Raven, a young Indigenous woman with a lifelong dream of becoming a mixed martial arts MMA champion. Having been invited for her first professional match, she intends on traveling to Montreal for her MMA fighting debut, if she can get past the obstacles on her path. Shadow Among the Prairies. We walk among shadows all the time. Even when we are alone, we always feel something near. A woman, Elaine, awakes to a disturbing limbo full of shadow beings, shadows that were once living humans. Elaine must find her way through this shadowed in-between world with no memory of who she is or how she died. Elaine's only companions? A young half-crazed woman that died in the 1930s, and an old friend from the past. Can each of them find the light, or will they fall further into darkness? Gordon. A simple meeting at a local coffee shop becomes a turning point in the preservation and celebration of Indigenous story. One man's passion and dedication inspires others to continue his legacy. All right. Hi there, Jennifer Dawn Bishop. This is so exciting.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I am so excited to chat with you. Right before I pressed record, we were sort of talking about a show that you opened last night. Could you tell me about it again?
Yeah, actually, it's part of our Circle of Voices production program that we run every year. And this year's show is called You Didn't Hear It From Me by Natana Spare. And it was debut directed by Ezra Forrest, both of them being Circle of Voices alumni. And it's about these 3 students in the school and just trying to understand their identity, but also, keeping up with the media and viewers. And also there's someone that's new that comes to the school and kind of like throws their world in a little bit of a twist.
And so the Circle of Voices is a program for Indigenous youth, right?
Yes, correct. It is actually a program that started back in 1999, and this is where I feel the oldest and youngest in the company because I was actually in the very first Circle of Voices program, and I was actually 13 years old when I did the program. And for me, it changed my life. Not only did it introduce me into theater, but also the cultural aspect as well, because that is something that I did not grow up knowing or practicing, so I really had a disconnect from my identity. And the program helped with all different areas of learning the arts and Indigenous storytelling. And I think the concept of that idea came from, I think, behind the scenes of Big Bear that had Gordon Tootoosis and a few others. So they were just on break and like, we don't have anything for our Indigenous youth out there. So from that moment, the concept of let's create a program. And I was part of that very first program, and it's been going since 1999, and this is our 19th year of holding the program.
Wow, that's amazing. It certainly changed your life, and I'm sure that it's changing so many other people's lives. That's amazing.
It has. It is something that's very near and dear to me, and I don't know where I would be today if it wasn't for that program. And because of how much it did for me, I want to make sure that we continue that for our next generations of youth and giving them that opportunity. So, and that's also why I'm still with the program, having the company.
Absolutely. So I did read up in an interview, I think it was a CBC interview from 2017, where you're quoted as saying, "I had no idea about the cultural aspect of my background." Do you mind digging into that comment a little bit more for me and explaining how Circle of Voices helped you?
Well, even just, it really started with when I was filling out the application, and I took it home and I asked my mom, I was like, "Mom, what does this mean?" It says, in First Nations, Metis, and, just et cetera. And she said, "Oh, you mark Metis." And I said, "Okay." But I really didn't ask what that really meant. I had no connect with it. I didn't know that there was a difference. So after sitting in the program and discovering this whole side of me, because my parents wanted us to make our own decisions. They did not want to force religion or anything like that on us. Like them both being from their background.
They're raising some free thinkers.
Which I am very grateful for, but it's also left me on this path of kind of piecing together who I am and finding parts of myself.
And so what was something that stuck with you, or that you quickly felt you held on to once you entered the program?
For me, a sense of belonging, a place where I was just present and just accepted. I wasn't, because I went through a lot of low self-esteem, went through a lot of bullying, so I really wasn't someone that never stood up for myself or felt like I belonged, like I had a couple of friends. And it was just different when I did the program and just, like feeling like that this whole other family and home was created. And it was something I look forward to doing, even at that young age. Like, forget sports and all those other things. I would wait there at the school for the program to start because I just happened to be going to that school, and that was where they held the program.
Awesome.
So, I didn't even go home. I just stayed.
What a perfect extra curve.
For sure.
Nice. So I see that you were a shy kid. How did doing theater bring you out of your shell?
It really brought up just like all this confidence, not overconfidence, but having that ability to like get up, perform, and speak in front of people, because I never did that before. I'd never learned about, even just thought about like learning lines to perform in a play. So not only was it just like uplifting to myself as an individual and just having that confidence, not necessarily if I was going to do other theater programs, but just as an individual, and learn to just express what made sense for myself. So, and then just this need to like continue to find a journey of my cultural background and identity. So it is a little bit of a mix, but those were certainly the two things that I've held on to for so long.
What was your first experience like in a theater? And I mean, it could be your first time going to Circle of Voices, or it could be your first time seeing a piece of theater, anything like that stands out to you.
I mean, I think from what memory recalls is that we would have kind of like a class trip to going to another theater, but for us, it wasn't necessarily a theater. It was just us going down the block and watching the high school play at Bedford. So that was my first introduction into theater. I don't quite remember what show it was because at that age I really didn't have much of an interest. It was just like, what, I was like, okay, we're out of school, we're going to a play.
We're not doing school, so that's nice. We're going to see a show.
Exactly. So that was a little bit of as far as going out and experiencing shows, was just going to a high school play, and I'm sure there might have been other things along the way. So I really didn't have a whole lot of introductions into the art, and so none of it grabbed at me because I couldn't connect with it or have an understanding or an appreciation. So doing the program made me look at things a little bit differently.
Okay.
So I remember they wanted us to bring something personal to us to express about ourselves. And I was very into writing poetry and drawing little pictures. And so I brought those with me. And it was a little bit nervous because, I was meeting,
of course,
sitting down with her, sitting down with the AD at the time, Kenneth Charlotte. And I just shared who, the little bit I was familiar about myself with them. And then they said I was accepted into the program. And yeah, to say the least, that I'd never felt so accepted in that moment in my entire life. It was such a great feeling.
Mm. There is something about sharing a precious object or because it feels like you're sharing a part of yourself. And when that's welcomed, it's relieving and so affirming.
And it really is, because it was things that I just kind of like kept to myself, doodling in my book, or just like I would write poetry about anything, but I also just didn't have the confidence or feeling like I could share those things. So every day that we started the program, we'd have a sharing circle, and we could share anything we want, whether it was about our day, what we were going through, a place where you could just be honest and open and just being heard. And I used a lot of that because I didn't have much to talk about, or I didn't want to talk about how I was being treated at school, how my day was going. So instead, I would just bring fresh poems that I had written throughout the day and share it with the group. And it was such an amazing feeling.
There's something empowering about being able to leave behind, in a sense, what's bothering you and bring forward what brings you joy and share that and have that received really well. I understand that.
Yeah, and even though, because you're also self-conscious because you're not exactly, at that age, I wrote all sorts of different things, and, not all of it was light. It was a bit dark, but that's what I felt like expressing, and I didn't want to share that with the, fellow classmates at the time either, because I thought for sure that I would have the school or someone being worried about me, when sometimes it was just something I felt like writing, and I didn't want to feel like I was being judged, and the only thing I would share is, whether it is about flowers or something like that.
Something seemingly inconsequential that nobody would ask you about.
That they wouldn't call my parents up like, hey, your daughter brought this to the school. We're a little concerned.
Yeah, of course. So when did you decide that theater was something that you were going to make a full go of, your career? How did you make that choice?
Honestly, my first day in the program. After meeting everyone, sitting there in the very first day, and I tell this to a lot of people, is that something just clicked. I knew exactly what I wanted to do with my life, how I wanted to pursue it, because it just held such a place in me, and I knew that I had to work my butt off to come back to the place that I felt the most connected in. So whether it was stepping up in working harder in school, learning to multitask better, I had a goal. I love doing my other side sports and stuff, but ultimately this felt like my dream, my passion that I wanted to pursue since that first day.
That is amazing. That is amazing. I love that.
Thank you.
And how is it now to be part of a team that changes the lives of people like yourself when you were younger? It's sort of a full circle moment, hey?
It is. And sometimes I'll come across that woman comes full circle. It's like, yeah, they're not wrong. I mean, it's certainly it's certainly so many different feelings at once, because I also didn't know that I would become artistic director someday.
No, you can't know that at 13.
No, not at all. I just knew that I had to continue working with the company, and they were so generous, and how my first taste into working with other youth came when I was I think I was 16 years old during the summer, and they said, we're starting up this performers playhouse camp where we go out to the different communities and hold a theater camp for kids for the week. So, doing different theater activities, and then they get to put on a little mini play at the end for the community. So that was my first taste into actually facilitating theater programs at that age. And it was so much fun. And even that felt like a partial semicircle, and then making my way around to being full circle. And I just knew, even though I knew that this title was going to be a big job, and me also having that fear of I don't have that experience that a lot of other individuals have, diplomas, degrees, BFAs. I didn't have those sort of things. So I was just what, how will I hold such a title? But then I just kept thinking about the Circle of Voices program, because it's always been something that I fight for, and remembering my experiences, how I went through the program, and just knowing that someone that's been through it and knows that understanding to help guide the way, and let them know that they'll always have a place to be accepted, expressing and telling the stories that they want to, or help build a story based on an idea of what's going on in the community. And I know I jumped right to AD, because I started out as the mentee artist position to Circle of Voices coordinator. So that was also a big change in my life. And then from there, a little bit of artistic associate for a short while, and then right to artistic director. So it's been a bit of a over 20-year journey to get around in that circle. To say
of course, it doesn't happen right away.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what it would feel like to be part of a legacy in such a involved way. And I'm sure all the people that work with you and all the kids that are coming through the program now absolutely feel loved and taken care of by this program. And it's so wonderful to have you leading it.
And I certainly do the best that I can. And I'm not saying it's always perfect, and I make my hiccups and mistakes along the way, but it's also me working harder to not let that happen, and always know that I'm there for the program, because we do many productions, and I love everything we do, but I consider the Circle of Voices the heart and soul of the company. And that's what helps lead me in my journey now.
Well, in a way, that program informs the future, right?
So, absolutely.
It does. All right. Should we move on to some story stuff?
Sure.
So what kinds of stories do you like to listen to?
The kinds of stories, I have a bit of a variety. I mean, I certainly love the supernatural, personal stories, a little dramedies. I love many different genres. I'm not as huge of a musical fan, but I still like to go and admire all the work that goes behind it. But yeah, I just love the mix. I love the mix, and sometimes I don't know what I love until I go watch the show myself.
That's fair. Sometimes you see something amazing for the first time and you're struck.
Yeah.
And would you say that the stories that you write follow the same veins as the things you go and seek out and listen to and watch?
Somewhat.
In genre, style?
Yeah, somewhat. Like, because it's always been a fascination of mine, but it's always from a place of family that I've noticed with my writing. It's the grit and there's something so personal about it. So it's always something, it's always family oriented. I notice from my end, whether it's from my dad's or my mom's side, influences. And then sometimes it's just weird of like, how am I going to tell this story and not just it feeling like an autobiography or anything like that. I'll start to picture some place of where the story takes place, or if I'm given an idea of like, here's some of the things we want you to think about. And it'll formulate, and I'm like, okay, is this going to be somewhat of the real world, or is this going to take place out of the real world? So I noticed that I've always had like a little bit of no matter what genre I have, it always comes from a place of family and personal experiences.
I guess family in the sense of you could be related by blood, but also family as in friends that are family.
Oh, absolutely.
Would you say?
Yeah, I could certainly say that parts of my life or even a brief moment or meeting with individuals along the way kind of stick with me, and that somehow makes it into my stories. Or if I have a couple of friends that have always been very near and dear to my heart, I somehow kind of do a little bit of a shout out to them in certain characters, whether it's through a name or a nickname or a little small scenario.
Do you have a specific shout out that you can share with our audience, like a little Easter egg?
A little Easter egg. Yes, actually, but I cannot tell which family member this happened to.
That's okay.
Because I think this family member will like go like this, like, don't you dare. I'm like, I would say that that Easter egg happened in the first Circle of Voices program I wrote, which was, the play, Iskuteo. There was a scene in there where the character was asking for butt wipe because there was nothing in there, and he said, I found one of your socks and used it. So with a certain family member, they were visiting their partner at the time, and they were not used to eating spicy food, and this person did not stock up on toilet paper, and they had nothing to give my family member except a sock. So I when there wasn't enough time for this character to jump into it because he was doing a dual role, so I needed to find something to help fill that gap to give him a chance to change costumes. So therefore, that memory popped in my head, and that kind of influenced that bridge there a little bit. So
that's awesome. There we go. You heard it here first, folks. There's your Easter egg. There's your Jennifer Dawn Bishop Easter egg. I love it. So obviously when you're starting to write a show, you're usually thinking about your family or family situations. Mm-hmm. How do you narrow down or decide which idea to extrapolate on?
I guess it depends on like what the themes we're addressing in that show. Like usually with the Circle of Voices, the AD will come up with a concept or something that's influence of what's happening out in the community and use that as a base and theme to start the next story. So at the time, our former artistic director, Curtis Petitous, I believe it was like an opening night party of The Postmistress by Thompson Highway, and we were at one of
That's a beautiful show.
Right. And it was actually, like it was just in that kind of like reception where he was like, I have some themes that I'd love to tackle in the next year's Circle of Voices production. And he's like, I'm really interested in the themes of mixed martial arts, Indigenous women, and mental health. And I remember saying, oh, that's such an awesome idea. That would be so cool because we've, tackled homelessness, we've tackled addictions, all sorts of things. So this was something that we haven't touched upon. So I was like, oh, I wonder who's going to ask. It's going to be awesome. But then, like, not too long later, I was preparing food for our Circle of Voices program because I was the coordinator at the time. And he asked if I wanted to write the story. And at first I laughed because I thought he was kidding. I thought he was kidding. And I was like, can I sit on that? Can I get back to you? And he said, absolutely. And because I was nervous because of how much that program always meant to me. And I just wanted to be able to live up to that legacy. It felt important to me. I didn't want to mess it up, or at least do it justice. So after sitting and chatting with a few friends, I felt confident of saying yes. So I gave him my answer and I started the work. I started to think about, all right, I'm not familiar with mixed martial arts styles. We certainly have a history of mental health goings-ons in my family. So I actually sat down with my dad a lot. 'Cause I don't remember a lot about my my grandfather, my mushum, but he had a lot of mental health issues, and he never went to the doctors or anything like that. So he had certain behaviors. He was also a scary man when he, was in those fits, and I also understood because sometimes I went through those moments of like, what if I have something that's, passed down through my bloodline of like having those, because I just didn't know. So I really took that with me, and sitting down, talking about his behaviors and learning more. But it wasn't just those stories. I kind of wanted to also do research about the different aspects of mental health, and so I did a lot of research while I was also living in Regina at the time, because I was part of the Globe Theatre Conservatory program. So aside from doing that, I was also going to the library and just like signing out all these different books on mental health, these medical books. I look like a medical student, I'm not going to lie.
You have to learn so much to discuss anything that you're writing about, or acting, or
even if it doesn't quite end up in the actual written text, it's what's the meaning behind it. And I kind of wanted to see if I can pinpoint what exactly was happening with my mushum. So did not write specifically in the show of what it was, because that was also years ago, and because he didn't go see anyone, I was not comfortable giving him a diagnosis even in the story itself, but elements that I know people would relate to, or even just those fears of having that pass on to you and changing you.
So this process, you're obviously doing a lot of research and interviewing, discussing with the family members that you're sort of inspired by for a particular piece. Are you a big scribbles everywhere kind of person, or are you a methodical, this happens and this happens? Like, what's your building process for structuring a story?
Well, what helped with the structuring is having my dramaturge at the time, and just asking, and just also remembering other little workshops I've sat in with other playwrights, like Ken Williams and them, and just like the layout of like how you are going to tell the story. And although I did certainly use that method, I would sometimes deviate with like scribbles. So there was things that I knew I wanted in the story. I just didn't know where to put them yet. So but I knew how I wanted to start the story. I knew how I wanted to end the story. What was chaos was just my notes and just lining them up. And I kind of think it worked well. It was almost like a process of, just almost like the squirrel kind of thing.
So it's sort of like knowing the rules to building a story, but then also giving yourself the freedom of inserting something that doesn't necessarily fit inside the rules, but because you want it there.
Yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because I know one of the most important, and I've heard this from a few different playwrights and dramaturgs, is that when you are creating a world, you have to be clear on the rules that are part of this world and following them, however that journey may be. So if you go against the rules that you've set, then you're already contradicting yourself of sorts.
How does building a world within reality affect that? I mean, for your other piece, Shadow Among the Prairies, that's very, you are building a world that no one has seen before. But in Iskateo, you're playing in a world that we can all relate to because we live in it in a way.
Absolutely.
So how do you think about rules in reality?
Well, in the reality of that, because of the fact that it was taking place in the real world, I was also just kind of like thinking about what would not fit and what would. And there is a big difference between my writings of the world of like Iskateo and Shadows Among the Prairies, but I'm also following the rules of life, I guess, if that makes any sense, because I know that there was no supernatural effects to this one, and also making sure that I'm realistic, thinking about the characters that are in here and their abilities of they wouldn't be able to do this, but they can do this because, I could see that actually happening. So even with the lead character of Raven, and also sitting down with some mixed martial arts folks, which they were really kind enough to sit down with me and kind of understanding their limits and also what my character's capabilities are. And it is a lot easier to write when something's in contemporary time, whereas Shadows, you're writing very real people in an unreal world. And that's always a nice difference, I guess. And even if the world of Iskateo, it's not in a shadow realm, but it is a world that everyone could. It's realities that you can put yourself in or that you've experienced along the way. Shadows took a very long time to write because that was a care and you're only speculating and creating. So it's harder to take the time to write something that's out of the world than what's in the world. I need a starting point, and then for myself, I need an end point of how I want to end the show. So for me, those two things are clear. But what's the work is the journey in the middle.
Inside.
Yeah, the inside, because I know that's going to take a while. I knew exactly where they wanted to end at the end. I very much appreciate collaboration or other artists' thoughts and stuff, so that could help solidify with what I present to them. But it feels very much just it's my process, and I never really realized that's that I had to think back. I'm like, how did I do these? And I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah, the podcast about playwriting is to make you think about but what is my process? When you're writing a show, how often, if at all, do you think about blocking on the stage?
I thought about blocking a lot for Iskateo because I knew it was going to be a very, very moving body, thing. So when I thought about how the actors would block, because normally, the director will fix that to be realistic in how I was even just writing out the things to help with the blocking. So I very much thought about that with with that process because I wanted to make sure. So I would actually do some of the moves myself, the different kind of like martial arts moves. Like there's like so much out there. So I did the research on moves that I thought that an actor could at least pull off, or leaving the option of if there's something that they weren't able to do, that they can add it in themselves. So I would just kind of go with the basic, all right, I think they can do this combo. If I can't do it, I'm certainly not going to write that in for that actor to not be able to do it. So that was kind of like a hands-on process for myself.
How did you come to the mixed martial arts in this piece?
Oh, right. Yes. And I think I mentioned it earlier, like I was never familiar with mixed martial arts much. So aside from just going up online and kind of finding out looking up the different moves, and also just kind of doing a focus on, all right, I got to look at the different female mixed martial arts or MMA fighters. And I was lucky enough to come across one name in particular, which was Charmaine Not So Sweet Tweet, who happened to live in Regina, which was perfect because I was going to be out there for the 4 months of the conservatory program, because I really wanted to get an insight from an actual individual to help like really build this character of Raven. So I wrote in, I was like looking up the different moves, and then I try it out, look at the tutorial. If I couldn't do it, then I'm like, that's coming out of the script. And just having this better understanding. And I was like, all right, I wonder if I should just try to see if she would grant me an opportunity to chat with her. And the only way to get a hold of her was through the Facebook Messenger. And so I did let her know. I was like, this is who I am. I am writing the show, and I really want to do justice to what that world is like. But I also understand if you get all sorts of messages from different people. So I pretty much take no offense if you
the
don't
good old
answer.
DM slide.
Because I could understand.
To reach out.
Yeah, there's probably lots of different fans, or however that is for someone in that position. And I was just very surprised to have her reach out back to me. And I was just so excited. She said, like your message seemed honest. It wasn't overstepping. And she said, I will absolutely have a coffee with you. So we did. Well, during my one day off a week, we met up.
Yes, I know the feeling.
Yeah. So I got to sit down with her, and was she just such a generous human being? And even before meeting her, I watched a couple of her fights, because she was fighting Ronda Rousey. She also told me about when she fought Chris Cyborg, LaToya Walker. I was just like watching, and just amazing. And so it was interesting sitting down and talking about, she gets all sorts of either like good fan love, or guys that, derogatory, or just like, hey, come fight me, or, please come kick me in the crotch. I want that so badly. Yeah. So it was just phenomenal. A lot of it's coming out of their own pockets. They're doing their not only like massive amounts of training, they're also working their butts off to save up money to get themselves to that fight. And they also have to pay for the flights of and accommodations of their coaches, which, for some of them, they have more than one because they're in different areas of fighting style. So, and even if they do win, unless you're one of those top high names, you're not getting much. You're just doing it for the love of your passion. You're literally fighting to do what you love best. And I really wanted to try to honor that in the story, or bring it up, was that it's just not, you're working hard to be in the thing that you love,
to be
most.
In the world of the thing that you love. Would you say that you write for the stage, or do you write to tell the story that you want to tell and solve the stage problems later?
Both. Definitely both. But I also like that if you don't always get descriptive, it also gives those designers or other readers a chance to explore the space and come up with something that maybe, so you're not always just giving them the answers of how to do something, but also giving them a chance to collaborate and problem solve. And I knew it would be a challenge being in the world of Shadows Among the Prairies, of Limbo, and see where they take that, because it's so vast in the story anyways.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so for me it always seems to be a bit of both.
How does workshopping affect your writing? I mean, for me, it totally changed everything when I would bring a draft in and then people would all of a sudden be saying my words and I'd be like, that's not how I thought that would be said. Or, how does that affect you when you get those workshops going?
It's always still for me, like, it's always a mind trip for sure, because it's like, oh my gosh, it's your things that you've been speaking or writing out loud in your brain, and then when you have someone else to help utilize that voice, it's amazing. And I actually value those workshops before, like when I was just kind of like a young writer, like, oh my gosh, I'm so terrible. I have like 10 pages of notes and stuff. But the more you develop your craft, you're very much appreciative of the voices, because you're just so used to hearing it from your perspective that you might miss something. So having people read your work out loud, whether it's good advice, bad advice, or just their honest feelings, is, like, ultimately for me, it's to help bring the story to life and make it make sense, because they want you to succeed in the story that you are trying to tell. Because I know I want to tell this story, but there's also times where you're not too sure about some of the journeys, and and I don't always have the most creative brain outlet. So having other folks in the room it's always an amazing feeling, but always nervousness too, because you are sharing something that you wrote. So
it does feel vulnerable.
Oh, absolutely. Because, I just poured months and months into this, and now I've got like 20 pages of notes, but me.
All of a sudden, everyone's got 15 opinions on what you just did, and there's like 20 people in the room, and they've all got a way they would change it. I know, yeah.
It also comes to the difference of if you're being commissioned to kind of write this story, whereas this one, I wrote on my own. So that one is coming right from here, whereas yes, I did write the story, but there were things that were set in place that was definitely the driving point, which was, the mixed martial arts, this and that. And this one, where like no one asked me to write this, because we're playwrights. Sometimes we'll just get something to that we want to write and just think about. And so this one came from a complete, just within 3 days. I ended up like waking up, and because this was something that I wanted to write something based on the character that was influenced from my auntie. So I'd say, whether it makes sense or not, that's what was kind of a difference. Whereas here's the things I'd like you to have in the story. Whereas this one was just, I just kept going. It just came from me. And later when we bring in actors and other readers, it's to help build it. Help structure it much better, because that was such a it felt like a very personal journey, and I knew that it wasn't going to be although I wrote the story in 3 days because it was like a nervous tick and I couldn't stop writing, even though the first draft was awful. That was the starting point.
Vomit pass. That's allowed. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That was my starting point. And I just kind of kept it to myself, and then finally started to preview it. And I knew that although it was written in 3 days, I knew that working on this story was going to take time. I knew it couldn't be rushed. So I was okay with that. So this Shadows was a 5-year journey.
You mentioned really briefly your aunt. I read that you wrote it to find closure over your aunt's death. How did it help you?
I'd like to think that death is not the end road for us. And I want to have that, like having that sense that she is finding a journey to happiness, or just, it was just because of the circumstances around her passing that had always stuck with me. I couldn't shake it off just because of the significance. She was living in Toronto at the time, and my dad has he's like a family of 9 siblings. And the starting point of this was my dad was just sitting in the living room with my mom, and they were watching TV. And then all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, my dad looks over to my mom and he said, I haven't talked to my sister Leah in a long time. He could have said any one of his other brothers, sisters, or anyone, but it was his sister that he just kind of said out of the blue. And then a few days later, that's when we found out of her passing, and it was actually at the time that my dad said that comment. So even though he was here in Saskatoon and her being out there, no matter what the distance of them, that family bond, he knew, he felt something off. And that was a driving point for me. There's a lot of elements on her life that helped develop the character of Elaine. So she did take off. Her nickname was Dusty from the Prairies. Mm-hmm. And she, she had moved to Toronto, she got married, had kids, but her husband was hit by a cab. And I remember her calling my dad because she wanted one of her nieces or nephews to come spend time. And I just remember them saying, no, we can't send our young kids out there. And so there was just looking back on her life, or even just before that, because her and my dad were survivors of the Maryville residential school. Mm-hmm. So just thinking about, it just left me a whole lot of different feelings of I wouldn't be here if my dad hadn't come out of that school, or thinking about the circumstances around my auntie, because out of all the siblings, those 2 were the ones that were forced to go to that school. So when the mass graves were revealed, and just I understood what intergenerational trauma was, but you feel it. It is really hard to explain. We're well, you didn't go. That didn't happen. I very much...
But it's part of you.
It is part of me, always. And that's what was some of the things when I looked back on creating the stories, or elements that I didn't realize were there, were because of just things that were always a part of me that just made it into the story without me even thinking about it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's amazing. Out of that workshop, or any workshopping process for that show, Shadow Among the Prairies, what was the biggest change you felt happen?
For me, it was the journey and character of Gary.
Okay.
Because Gary didn't really, I knew what he was inspired by, but I didn't I had to create actually a backstory for him, because I didn't have one for him, and this part is also an Easter egg, true, is when my auntie, she actually, when she was living out in Vancouver, she had a best friend, and they partied, did all sorts of things, and someone did they found a gun, and she in her very intoxicated mind and stuff had said like, oh, I never held a gun before or anything like that. And her buddy gave her the gun. And because he was also very much intoxicated, he dared her to shoot him. And yeah, so she ended up doing time as well. So the character of Gary came from her friend that she had killed years ago. And that's what inspired that part of like running into this individual that she was responsible for killing. I mean, it was by accident. She didn't do much time, but because that's all I remembered about him was like she had killed her best friend. So what changed the most was Gary. Who is Gary? Who is this person? Right. So he was there, but he just didn't have his own story. And I wanted to create those moments, his death beforehand, what kind of person he was like. 'Cause they were really good friends from what I recall from my dad, what he shared. So that was a big change in the story. Was really
well. It's also a nice way to, while also honoring your aunt, honoring her best friend on stage too.
Yeah.
Okay, I would love to ask you a little bit about the Indigenous Cities Project through the National Arts Center. I was really taken with the idea of an urban art gallery. Do you think you could speak to that a little bit more?
Well, like, it was such a cool idea. Like, this was, like, during the pandemic lockdown. And the thought of, you know, like, where the treaties are and what are moments that really impact our connection to the land, and not just like the stories, but like where that took place. So I thought it was interesting when we had these beginning meetings, not only of just creating opportunities for Indigenous artists, but also finding the street corner. There's something like special that happened there, or a memory, or a feeling, you know, and just like highlighting that, because, you know, there's all sorts of like, you know, whether there's good things happening, bad things happening, or things that we just didn't know. So it is also finding kind of like a discovery of Saskatoon or Treaty 6, because these were people that I'd known for a while, but I never knew about these particular places that you would go to with your iPod or phone, whatever. I thought it was really neat that you would go to the location and then you could hear the story playing of the significance of that location. And I thought that was really cool.
When you're around Saskatoon now, having done this project, do you feel differently when you're in those areas? Do you attach those memories to that spot now?
I do. It certainly holds. It holds more meaning for sure, because like even with the story of like the memory of Gordon, you know, like when I pass by that location, all I think about and hear is the story that was shared with me. So it's more than just that hub of coffee and going to meetings and stuff. There's something special about it. It's more than that. It's, you know, sometimes it's at that location where a pivotal moment in your life changed you. And having that in the locations that are close by, I'm now not just like, oh, I have somewhere to be. I find myself taking that moment and thinking something more. That's more than just like a sidewalk or passing by the mall. I'm thinking about things that I never would have given 2 cents about.
And what is it like to hold on to somebody's gifted memory that way? It's not your memory, but how does it make you feel to have someone else's memory mean so much?
I certainly felt an honor and a privilege. And originally I wasn't I didn't have myself down as one of the storytellers. Like when I had approached our Irene Oakes, who's the adopted daughter of Gordon and, co-board chair. And I said, it'd be wonderful if you could take part of this project. Is there a memory that you would share? And she did. She was kind enough to tell me this story. And then it was my job to find an artist to pair up to help, collaborate and help enlighten her, this precious memory of hers. And I struggled with thinking about who to bring on to take this memory. And it wasn't out of just, it's like, well, I'm just going to go do it. No, I felt an importance to it as someone that, we are a company that's named after him. He is a pivotal pillar of the bringing of this company. And I don't know. I don't know if it had anything to do with the fact that I've been with the company the longest. I just felt like I should, I talked to her about it. I said, I feel like I should be the one to help care for this memory. And
absolutely.
Yeah, so it was such an honor to receive this gifted memory, this moment, because I know how much the company means to me and a lot of members of the community. So even though it wasn't my area of expertise of doing audio works, what drove me was just that love for Gordon, that understanding of sometimes it's that pivotal moment that makes you work harder into being just a better human being,
I really enjoyed listening to that story, so I'm glad that you took it on. Would you say that you've had any instrumental mentors in your life?
Ooh, I would have to say there's certainly been a lot of instrumental folks. If I had to start back from the beginning of that circle, I would definitely say the start of that was our artistic director at the time, which was Kenneth Charlotte, who really gave me something to do on the stage, and just he was the start to that journey when he started talking with us, meeting with us. And then with the playwright at the time, Dion Kisokio, and then just other artists along the way. And I know I could just keep naming them off, but there'd be moments in my life where I wasn't quite too sure. I was like, what if I'm not doing the right thing? What if I'm losing the passion? Or maybe this is not what I'm meant to do, because that, those feelings of uncertainty or just doubt will start to peek in. So what really helped drive those away was people like Keith Barker, Kenneth Charlotte, sorry, I said his name already, Kenneth T. Williams, Yvette Nolan. They were all these phenomenal people that I met along the way that, was assuring on my path and just reigniting that flame wherever it felt like it was starting to dim. It was just saying hi or hearing them talk or having their thoughts on my works and seeing how they work was just okay. It really helped me keep going on my path.
Nice. Okay, one last question. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received, hands down?
Fear does not control you, only if you let it.
We're going to carry that one forward. Anyone who's listening to this podcast, do not let fear control you. Only if you let it, it will. Amazing. Thank you so much, Jennifer Dawn Bishop. It was so lovely to talk with you today, and I'm so excited for everyone to hear this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
On today's show, I sat down with playwright Jennifer Dawn Bishop and we discussed her shows Iskateo, Shadow Among the Prairies, and Gordon. Stage Right is brought to you by the Globe Theatre in Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada Council for the Arts, my associate producers Tanner Zare and Riley Hardwick, who wrote all of our awesome music for the podcast, Chris Haynes, our sound engineer, and me, Sierra Haynes. If you want to keep up with our theatre online, find us on Instagram at Globe Theatre Live. And if you'd like to see what I'm up to, you can find me online at The Sinking Canoe. Thanks for listening, and please, exit stage right. Until next time. Cheers! We're officially open.